We all know the legend of Genghis Khan, the master of war, the unifier of the steppe, the man who rose from starvation and exile to command the largest land empire the world has ever seen. His banners flew from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Vienna, and his name still echoes across continents. The statues, the legends, the stories of his unstoppable armies, they all celebrate his brilliance as a general, his strategic mind, his unmatched power. But what if the story we tell is only half the truth? Beneath the shining armor and heroic songs lies another version of history, darker, colder, and far more revealing. The true engine of Genghis Khan's empire wasn't just his horses, bows, or military genius. It was his ruthless system, a machine built on control, terror, and a chilling understanding of human nature. It was an empire that turned bloodlines into weapons and reproduction into strategy. Behind every victory, there were laws and customs that reshaped entire tribes, systems that used marriage, women, and family as instruments of domination. Genghis Khan understood something most conquerors ignored. If you could control life itself, the act of birth and legacy, you could rule the future. So how did he do it? What hidden practices defined the Mongol court? And what codes, written not in ink but in blood, governed the most powerful empire on earth? In this story, we'll uncover 5 historically documented practices from Genghis Khan's world. Traditions so brutal and deliberate that they reveal the true foundation of his empire. This account is based on real sources: the secret history of the Mongols, the chronicles of Persian historian Rashid al-Din, and the first-hand reports of European envoys like John of Plano Carpini. If you appreciate historical truth that goes beyond legend, make sure to subscribe and tell us in the comments which city you're listening from. Now let's begin with the first chapter of this dark legacy. Number 1. Mass marriage as an act of annihilation. Before there was an empire, there was vengeance. In the late 12th century, the Mongolian plateau was a battlefield of rival tribes, each fighting for survival, honor, and dominance. Among these enemies, none were more despised by the young Temujin, the man who would become Genghis Khan, than the Tatars. They had poisoned his father, Yasugei, leaving his family in ruin. What began as a tribal feud turned into a lifelong vendetta. Decades later, in 1202, Temujin finally cornered the last of the Tatar armies. His command that day was not for victory, it was for extinction. According to the secret history of the Mongols, his order was brutally precise. The order was simple, cruel, and methodical. Every Tatar male, taller than the linchpin of a cartwheel, roughly 3 feet high, was to be executed without hesitation. Imagine the scene. You are a Tatar boy, dragged from the ashes of your burning camp. A Mongol soldier forces you to stand beside a wooden cartwheel. A silent guard compares your height to the metal pin at its center. If your head rises above it, even by an inch, the sword falls. No trial, no mercy. The judgment takes seconds. The slaughter lasts for hours. Thousands are cut down in an act of vengeance so precise it feels mathematical. But the women are spared. Not out of compassion, but purpose. To Genghis Khan and his generals, women were not captives. They were resources, instruments of absorption. The men die, but the women carry the conqueror's blood. This was not rage, it was policy. Temujin and his commanders claimed the most beautiful and high-born women for themselves. Among them were 2 Tatar sisters, the noble Yasugen and Yasui, whom Genghis Khan took into his personal household. With them, he erased an entire people, not through fire, but through lineage. The Tatar bloodline ended on the male side and was absorbed through the womb on the female side. Within a generation, the Tatars no longer existed, their identity consumed by the empire that destroyed them. This method, conquer, kill the men, absorb the women, and erase the name, became the unspoken law of Mongol expansion. Take the Merkits, for example, the tribe that once kidnapped Genghis Khan's beloved wife, Berta. Years later, when he crushed them, his vengeance was merciless. He took the wife of the Merkit chief, a woman named Tenga, and later gifted her to his son Ögedei. That same woman, once a prize of war, would eventually rule the Mongol Empire as regent after Ögedei's death. From captive to empress, her fate showed how conquest didn't just destroy families, it reshaped dynasties. Then came the Karets, once allies, later enemies. After defeating them in 1203, Genghis Khan captured the niece of their ruler, the intelligent and striking Sorghaghtani Beki. She was married to his youngest son, Tolui, From that union came 4 sons, Mungke, Kublai, Hulegu, and Arik Böke, the grandsons who would rule China, Persia, and the Mongol heartlands. An entire imperial dynasty was born from one woman taken as spoils of war. It was not merely conquest, it was genetic engineering by sword. Kill the men, claim the women, control the future. That was the first principle of Mongol domination. Number 2, the Iron Law of the Yasa. In 1206, on the banks of the Onon River, the tribes gathered in a massive council known as the Kurultai. There, Temujin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, universal ruler of all the steppes. But an empire forged in chaos needed order, and from that day came a new law, a secret code that would govern the living and the dead, the Yasa. The Yasa wasn't a written constitution or public decree. It was whispered among princes, recited in the shadows of tents, and enforced in blood. No one outside the elite truly knew all its rules, but everyone understood its punishments. Its reach extended into every corner of life: loyalty, war, and even love. The penalty for adultery was death. It didn't matter if you were a prince or a peasant. If a married woman was touched by another man, the sword was waiting. Persian historian Juvaini, writing in the court of the Mongols decades later, recorded its severity. He noted that while a Mongol man might have multiple wives or concubines, to even approach another man's wife was a capital crime. The law was not about morality or religion, it was about control. A distracted warrior was a weak warrior. A feud over a woman could split an army. The Yasa made women into property and protected that property with death. But its reach didn't end there. The death penalty also applied to acts of sodomy, espionage, theft of a horse, desertion, and cowardice. Even minor acts could be fatal. A soldier who ignored a dropped item on the march, or one who urinated in a river, could be executed. To modernize, these seem like absurd cruelties. But in the harsh logic of the steppe, they were acts of survival. One polluted water source could kill an army faster than arrows. An undisciplined soldier could destroy a campaign. The Yasa was the empire's operating system, a framework of absolute obedience. Its fear held together one of the most mobile, efficient military states in human history. Under its shadow, the Mongol people learned that every breath was permitted only by the Khan's will. It was law as weapon and discipline as faith. Number 3, the 4 great ordos. The Khan's true power did not rest solely in his armies, but in his household. A living, moving palace that mirrored the empire itself. At its heart stood his 4 principal wives, each commanding her own court, her own servants, and her own wealth. The first and most honored was Berta, his companion from youth, the woman who had once been stolen from him, whose rescue began his rise. But after his conquests, 3 more royal households were founded, 1 for Kulan of the Merkits, and 2 for the Tatar sisters, Yasugen and Yasui. These 4 women each ruled a vast mobile palace called an ordo, meaning camp or palace. But these were no mere tents. They were centers of power, administration, and diplomacy, each a reflection of the Khan's dominion. The royal camps of Genghis Khan's wives were not mere tents scattered across the plains. They were moving kingdoms called ordos, vast mobile cities that carried the power of the empire wherever they traveled. Each ordo belonged to one of the Khan's 4 principal wives: Berta, his first and most loyal; Hulan, the proud Merkit queen; and the 2 Tatar sisters, Yasugen and Yesui. Every queen ruled her domain like a monarch. She commanded her own guards, servants, herds, and vast wealth. The historian Rashid al-Din wrote that these royal camps functioned as independent courts, centers of law, trade, and diplomacy. But above all, they were the wombs of empire. From Berta came 4 sons, Jochi, Chagatai, Ogadai, and Tolui, who would later divide the world among them. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his empire and his wives passed to his heirs. According to the Mongol custom of levirate marriage, a son could inherit his father's wives, except his own mother. European travelers were horrified, but to the Mongols, this ensured that no wealth, land, or influence ever left the bloodline. Some of these women ruled, others became rewards for generals or tokens in political deals. And behind this system stood unimaginable cruelty. When Genghis Khan crushed the Khwarezmian Empire, cities like Samarkand and Nishapur were wiped from the map. Women were enslaved, bloodlines erased, and terror became law. At Nishapur, when a Mongol prince was slain, his widow, the Khan's daughter, demanded revenge. Every man, woman, and child was executed. The skulls of the dead were piled into towers. The Mongol Empire wasn't built only by warriors. It was sustained by fear, discipline, and the brutal rule of the ordos, where power itself was born.